Hello, dear community, and very welcome to our talk today. We have a very, very special guest in our studio today, Jaron Lanier from the US, but meanwhile also Austrian citizen, one of the most fascinating thinkers of our time, a musician, best-selling author, philosopher, and Prime-Unifying-Scientist in Microsoft. I could introduce him for the next 2 hours, but I just picked up a few titles that he has. The rest, I will leave to my co-host of today's talk, Martin Rauchbauer, the founder of Tech Diplomacy Network, who brought our special guest to our studio today. Guys, welcome to our studio.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for being here. Martin, what's the Austria connection? What are the topics going to be that we're going to cover today? And could you introduce Jaron a bit further as well?
Yeah, what a pleasure to introduce a dear friend, Jaron, who just arrived from California, from the Bay Area, where I personally spent the last 9 years. And it's really kind of a challenge, as you mentioned, to introduce Jaron because he's so multifaceted. He's a computer scientist and one of the leading ones on this planet, but he's also, a technologist and an artist, and a very good one. He personally owns more than 2,000 musical instruments, which is already a feat in itself, but he also plays each one of them. So he's able to play all these musical instruments. He's a prolific writer on topics largely related to the future, and a very successful writer at it. He just told us before that he had wrote 2 books that were bestsellers just in the German-speaking market alone. So I would call Jaron, among many other things, you can read his writings in the New Yorker, where he publishes frequently. One of the most interesting thinkers to think about the future, particularly when it comes to the arts and when it comes to new frontier technologies. He has personal connections right into the history of artificial intelligence. We might be able to get a glimpse into that. And I would also say, one of the problems of frontier technologies is we often focus on the wrong things at the time, and only with time we understand what they really are about, what their potential is, and what their challenge is. And usually Jaron gets it earlier than other people. So that will be a very wonderful opportunity. I want to start, as you said, with this aspect that I soon discovered when I met Jaron, which is that he is actually an Austrian citizen. He regained his Austrian citizenship.
Only very recently.
Very recently, into 2025. And I mean, it is a history that is in part very painful. And so I would like to ask you how this Austria connection came about and how you feel being in Austria.
Well, the short version is very simple. My mother grew up here and were Jewish, and she was taken by the Nazis as a girl and survived. And I don't want to start crying, but at any rate, the Austrian government has a program to offer citizenship to descendants of victims of the Holocaust. And I had that only became possible fairly recently, and I did it in part to honor my mother, because I know that, I mean, she died when I was young in a car accident in the U.S. But I'm sure she would be really happy that I did it. But also I have a daughter, and my daughter has, I don't know how she got it or where it came from, but she has a bit of a character that reminds me of Vienna. She kind of has this feeling of this sort of sweet and a little cynical at the same time, a little very intellectual, but at the same time never dry or hard the way an intellectual might be in, let's say Germany, for instance, or other places, and that very particular Viennese quality, and somehow she has it. I don't know why, but so I got it for her too, because I don't know what will happen with that. I have no idea. But this is the first time I've traveled on the Austrian passport, and something about it just feels good. I have to say, it just feels good.
Cool.
And it's a little intangible. So there you are.
And the first days in Vienna? You like it here?
It is not my first time in Vienna. I've come to Vienna many times over the years. It's, I have to say, a lot of the world right now is kind of crazy, and everyone in Vienna has heard the joke that if the world's going to end, go to Vienna because it'll take 20 years longer, right? That's a very common joke, right? But I think it applies right now. I was just in Rome, and a lot of people are quite tense about just what's happening politically. People feel a sense of great uncertainty. The United States is insane right now. I mean, it's really a very tense place, and it feels kind of... very concerning, very unclear where things are going. But there's something about Vienna right now where it feels, it's the strangest thing, like just sitting in a cafe or walking down the street, just normal things. People seem kind of calm and like as if they live on a planet that's sane and functional. Yeah. And I want to live on that planet. I like that, yeah.
Welcome to the past.
Welcome to the past.
Right.
Before we deep dive into topics, maybe just one clarification, since I introduced you as Prime-Unifying-Scientist at Microsoft. You are today not talking on behalf of Microsoft.
So Microsoft and I have an arrangement, which is that I often say things that are very far from what would be an official Microsoft statement or policy, very far in some cases. And for years, we've just had an arrangement where I make it clear that I'm speaking for myself and not for the company. And everyone seems to understand that distinction and accept it. If I hated the company, of course, I would not work there. So it's not a matter of covering over an antagonism, but there's sometimes a difference. And I think it would be positive for more tech companies to encourage that kind of openness and communication and thought. Most of them don't do that.
It speaks for Microsoft as well.
Yeah, I think it speaks well for Microsoft, and I think Microsoft probably has benefited overall from it. I'm not the only one. There's a few others, but I'm probably the most prominent one who speaks independently while also being a researcher. So far, it's working, and it's good.
Martin, we could speak, Jaron, about like a week on 1 billion topics.
Right.
But we have a digital video format that has a certain length. What kind of topics do we want to cover today? I have some questions that interest me as well, but you recommended to start with some comparison.
Yes, I would really like to start kind of in a very general, big picture. And if we pick on what you just said about Vienna and the vibe it feels, I would like you to compare a little bit Vienna, maybe broader speaking, even Europe, because some of the characteristics of, living kind of in a calm way and maybe not visibly, innovative. That's kind of a bit of the image problem Europe has when it comes to comparison with Silicon Valley. Now, you personally have a lot of connections to Silicon Valley. You live in the Bay Area. You work for Microsoft, but you also have personal connections with some of the big names there. What's the difference in the vibe you get when you converse with Silicon Valley people on the future, and you compare that to what the feelings is here in the old continent?
Right. Well, this is a huge question, and I could speak about this for hours. How do we begin? There's several things that are extremely important to understand. The very most important thing to understand by far is a little piece of math that's usually known as the problem of network effects. And so what network effects are is when you have a network of information or a network of events that influence each other, and there's very, very low friction, meaning that influence or events or causality, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, if these things spread very, very rapidly and with very little loss, then what tends to happen is the network itself can become more important than whatever is flowing on the network. And in particular, networks have a way of certain nodes on the network becoming more important than other ones. And then that has a compounding effect to the point where you have hyper influential nodes, and then the others tend to sort of fall away. This mathematics predates the digital era, of course, although we understand more about it now. Much of it was originally developed in legal circles to understand monopolies and telephone systems way back when they were analog. And some of it has come from the game theory research community, and there are many other sources. But what it means is that if you have a digital network that's low friction, you tend to have a very small number of hyper winners, and then you have a little bit of a circle around those of people who are feeders or dependent on the winners, the medium-sized things, and then you have a fall off to wannabes. But because of the nature of it, all the wannabes, all the people at the little level always have this illusion that they're just a step away, that your YouTube channel might blow up, and every once in a while one does. The process by which a node in a very low friction network becomes important is semi-random, so it's not quite predictable. And this is why the venture capital community in Silicon Valley tends to have a portfolio with a lot of similar companies, because the idea is that you don't really know which one will, but one will. Okay. So that's the very most important thing to understand. Now, I think just to simplify, to oversimplify, China understood that game and Europe did not. And so the Chinese looked at this, and what they said is the only defense against this is extreme aggression. And so they absolutely blocked US-based internet services. Just you cannot get on them in China, maybe a little bit through special services, but very rare. And then they absolutely enforced Chinese ones. And then they absolutely tried everything to get into the Western markets, to turn the tables. And so now we have TikTok, where young people are on a Chinese social media site. I find that to be one of the more concerning things going on. I think that that actually is a really significant event in world history, and we don't know how it'll play out. And we don't, but the thing is, Europe also has TikTok, and Europe is not dealing with, America is starting to maybe deal with it aggressively. We still don't know. That's still unfolding. All right, so network effect is the number one thing. The number two thing is that people change because of network effect. So you start to have a human society with certain people who become extraordinarily wealthy and influential. So in the United States now, a handful of people who run digital networks of one kind or another are richer than the whole half or even two-thirds of the rest of the country, which is kind of dysfunctional in my view. I don't think that makes sense as a way to run a society, but nonetheless that happens because if you can attach yourself to the top node in a low friction network, then you become the most powerful person. So people like Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Ellison, Elon Musk, and so on are those people. And the thing is, though, that when you're in that position, because nobody can really talk to you anymore, and all the information you get is all about other people trying to get something from you, you lose touch with reality yourself and you become a little crazy. So I've seen this happen many times, and I'm not saying anything behind somebody's back. They've all heard me say it directly, but there's a way that this, even for the winner, there's a way that this distorted situation kind of makes people crazy. And there's a kind of an insanity that comes out. And this is a serious problem right now on different levels. So that's the next thing to know. But in terms of business, this hyper-centralization around just a few people completely changes the nature of business. So if you go back to the Silicon Valley of 30 or 40 years ago, which I knew very well, I've done startups. I've four of my when I was much younger, I had 4 startups sell. One became part of Google, one became part of Oracle, one became part of Adobe, and one became part of Pfizer.
Wow.
So I've done the whole startup thing. But in those days, it was a very different thing. Right now, there's a very prescribed path where if you have a startup in Silicon Valley, it depends on who you know, and you talk your way into you're part of this accelerator, then you know this person, then you know that person, and it's much more, I would say, it's not officially institutional, but it's functionally institutional in a way it didn't used to be. So that's another big difference. The other thing is that 30 or 40 years ago, there were multiple business outcomes, or what are called exit strategies, for having a startup. It might grow enough to go public, it might be acquired, or it might not go public, but it still might have enough assets to sell that it becomes profitable for the people who had equity in it. And there are a few different ways it could go. These days, it's there are still a few that become big and go public on their own. They're called the unicorns. They're rare, but it can happen. But almost all of them really are trying to be acquired. And so what happens is people build their startup, and then the idea is that one of the big players, a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon or whatever, an Apple, will just buy that group, and then the people will get a premium because the company's bought their equity. They become employees, but the company itself doesn't really go on to continue whatever mission it started with. It's more like a way of marketing the team, and that's by far the most common outcome, which is a little strange. I'm giving you maybe more answer than you asked for. Should I stop, or I can tell you a little more?
Would that mean that they don't produce sustainable innovation on the market if it's just about selling the startup?
This is a very interesting question. So, and this brings us into AI.
Yeah.
So, I am in the AI community. I know people, and it's probably fair to say I'm part of the. There's a very small community that really runs AI in practice of maybe a few hundred people. So there are the 5 people who run companies, and then there's maybe a few hundred scientists and engineers who kind of create the culture and steer it. It's probably fair to say that I'm in that group of a few hundred. However, I'm the heretic. I'm not quite the only heretic, but I might be the most at the edge. I'm in the castle, but barely. I'm not on the outside throwing spears at the castle. I'm kind of in the castle, but on the other hand, I don't necessarily get invited to all the balls. Like I'm like a slightly weird. I'm a slightly weird person to be in that circle. And one of the reasons why is that I'm very critical of the way we've defined AI and what we're doing. Yeah. So the traditional way of talking about technology is technology is supposed to achieve something, and the nature of the achievement is practical. So if you have technology, you can, get from one place to another place with higher efficiency or something like that. There's something practical.
Improve something.
But with artificial intelligence, the whole idea was kind of born in a very strange way in Alan Turing's mind, who is there's a whole very interesting psychological perspective, and this was a person who was living an illegal life. He was gay and ultimately died for it. But he was very deeply concerned with this question of who's a legitimate person for obvious reasons. And he came up with this notion that there's no definite test for who's a real person. There's not a meter you can put on somebody and the meter will tell you if somebody's real. So really, the test of intelligence, the test of personhood, the test of moral agency is only in other people. But the problem with that is that from an engineering perspective, if what you're trying to do is just convince people of something, you're essentially a stage magician. Like what we've done is we've said, as long as we can make people feel like the program is alive, that the program is a possible lover, the program is a possible therapist, is whatever. The program is a writer, the program is produces movies or whatever. As long as people accept them, then we've succeeded. And I have a problem with that because people aren't fixed. People's can have lower standards or higher standards. People change over time. And if we're developing the whole society and prioritizing resources into getting people to accept a certain interpretation of what some companies offer, we can't really tell if we've done anything or not. We are like stage magicians who didn't tell the audience that this is just magic tricks, you know?
Is part of the problem even the wording? I remember you writing an article in the New Yorker. I think the title was "There is no AI."
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the very fact that we call artificial intelligence, and for many decades now, and we talk about AI winters and AI, summers, as if there was a clear understanding of what we mean with it, and as if we are kind of on a line of progress towards that goal. And then, of course, also the question of what's the dark side of AI? It all hinges on the premise of that very wording of artificial intelligence, which you challenge, which you
yeah, well. There is a narrative. A lot of it was initiated by the person who's the most important mentor to me when I was young, very long ago, Marvin Minsky. But the narrative is that we're on this ramp of creating this new life form. And the closer we get to creating the new life form, the more progress that is. And the problem, I was just talking about how it's theatrical, that it's really in the eye of the beholder. There's no definite truth or falseness to the proposition. It really is a matter, it's a little bit like some people think the fetus is a person, some people think it isn't, some people think animals deserve some level of rights, and others think that that doesn't make sense. It's one of those things, and in each of those cases, we can have different opinions, but this is like that. It's very hard to say exactly, but unlike those other ones, if you really want to believe that computers are people too, or about to be people too, the thing is, they're not like animals or fetuses or something that just comes from reality. They're products from a particular company. So there's a whole economic and power and philosophical layer, sort of a spiritual layer, in which you're giving over extraordinary powers to particular companies if you accept that belief. So it is different in this case. But I wanted to just finish one thought about the startup scene, because I really was trying to talk about business. I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I'm trying to get as much as I can out in the short time we have. Because of the theatrical nature of AI, a lot of what happens in the startup scene is not exactly technical, but it's more rhetorical. It's almost become more like Hollywood. So if there's a startup that can say, we have this new approach where AI is this or that, I don't know, just some story that sounds good. In a way, that's become valued even more than some specific technical achievement. That's not always true. There's still people who do extraordinary technical things. But there is this increased theatricality. So I presume that you will ask me, what can Europe do? What should Europe do? And I've just been trying to lay down some of the basic situational qualities of Silicon Valley right now as a start at talking about that.
I mean, just what I'm thinking while listening to you, since you're saying it's a theatrical thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's a magician on stage, are we then taking it too seriously?
Oh, in my opinion, we are. I mean, I think, especially when you look at the level of resources being put into AI, we don't know how things will turn out. So my understanding of what the algorithms that we sell as AI now do is not dismissive of them. I think they're great. I think we're doing something really good. But the thing we're doing is we're combining the efforts of people in a new way using a massive amount of statistics. So instead of just having a library full of papers, we can process all the papers in a unified way, which is called training the model, and then we can access them all at once in a new way. Whether we try to, out of that, create a theatrical vision of a fake scientist or something is purely a theatrical decision. But at the core of that, improving the ways that people can collaborate is incredible. That is all that our biggest inventions have always been about that. Language, writing, money, cities, democracy, and all these things are just ways of people coordinating better. And this is another one of those. And if you understand it that way, you can understand how to get value from it better. And that's the more just sort of technically grounded way of talking about it instead of all these fantasies of new creatures.
Where do you see the value that it will produce? Maybe simple use cases are also not as simple ones. Since you're an author, a writer, are you going to use AI to write your books?
No, I'm not.
Why?
When I write, I'm attempting to say real things. I'm attempting to use the language in a intense way. I'm trying to introduce new thoughts into the world. The models don't do that. The models combine what has existed before. Now, here, some of my colleagues will jump on me and say, no, this thing emerges. And I don't know. I mean, most of the people who disagree with me have less technical understanding of how the models work, I just have to say. And so I've seen many attempts to create simulations of my writing. In fact, I would say there's not a single day that I don't receive a fake essay by myself online. There are fake versions of me that say things that sound like me on all the social platforms. I'm not on any of them myself, and I just have to trust that anybody who's interested in what I say will know that I'm not on any of these platforms, and so none of that is real.
How about the other forms of creativity? You're, as we said, creative in so many ways. One of them being very visible. You're also a crafter of jewelry, and I think the jewelry you're wearing.
Well, this is all just from the last few weeks.
From the last few
like
weeks.
working with real materials and metals and stones. I just need it because everything's so digital. So
and you're also.
It's probably a little excessive. I know it's a little loud.
Fantastic.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're also a musician and a composer, and so do you think that there is some space? I wouldn't say for AI creativity, but for some sort of artistic projects of collaboration where you use AI as a creative tool?
I'm indifferent to it. If somebody enjoys something or finds it meaningful, it's not my job to judge them, and I never would. There's a fine line here, a sort of almost a mystical line. So let us say that you believe that there's never anything new and that all human creativity is really just reusing things that have come before, which is something that was heard very commonly during the Pirate Party era. There's no real originality, there's no real authorship. This was also something that we heard in some cases from academic philosophers. And there's no definite truth to this, so it's one way of thinking that is not entirely unsupportable. But the thing is, if you believe that, then in these low-friction networks, it means all power, wealth, and influence goes to the center. It means that nobody else except for the owner of the network means anything. Everybody else is meaningless, but whoever owns the server is meaningful. That is the only possible economic, spiritual, or political outcome of that attitude in the context of these networks. So all the Pirate Party people who were saying we're going to support, we're democratizing things, actually just put more and more power in the central networks. That doesn't, you just have to be aware of the complete spectrum of effects of your beliefs. But also, there is this interesting question, which is there something sort of magical or special or sacred about people at the end of the day? Mm-hmm. And this is a matter of faith. There's no way to prove it. There's no way to have logical arguments and come to a definite answer. It's very much like the ancient debates about God, where, ultimately it's a matter of faith. You can't prove God. I don't know about God. I'll leave that aside. But the thing is, the reality of people, the reality that your own sense of consciousness is a real thing, that there is something magic, that art can actually mean something and not just be rehashing, that it can be in the moment and it can have a kind of reality, and the aesthetic feeling is something substantial. These things are matters of faith, and I hold that faith. I used to say consciousness is the only thing that isn't reduced if it's an illusion. It's a self-perpetuating matter of faith. But of course, if somebody wants to apply that faith to a product we sell and say, this is an artificial intelligence, this is my new girlfriend or my new God, and I hear from those people every single day, I can't prove they're wrong, but I do want them to understand that their choice is one that makes them subservient. And if they don't understand that, they don't understand what they're doing. And I think that's extremely important.
Is there no proof in your technological understanding of this technology?
No, there can't be.
That it has no consciousness?
There can't be any proof about consciousness or the specialness of people. These are matters of faith. I think they're good matters of faith. I mean, let's say, if you compare two views, one is that AI is a new kind of creature, and the other is that AI is just a human collaboration and they're only people, right? They're both equally valid. Mm-hmm. There's no way to prove that one is correct and one isn't. Do you know the artist MC Escher?
No.
Oh.
I don't think so. Is it a singer or...?
No, he's a famous visual artist.
Unfortunately.
Okay, so this is a generational difference, maybe. Never mind. Have you ever seen a picture where there's an illusion where you can either see two people talking or you can see a vase? Yeah. So this is an image that can be seen in two ways, the figure in the ground. And this is one of those things. You can see it either way.
Yeah.
However, if you see it as a form of human collaboration instead of as a new creature, you increase your power and your ability to think about new situations. So, for instance, if you believe it's a new creature, then you'll say things like, oh, the new creature's coming along and doing people's jobs, so people will be out of work, and all the power will go to the people who own the AIs, and that's it. The future of the species is that there will only be 5 people, and everyone else will die, and the people who own the AIs will live forever, and everybody else will die. That's one way you can think, and that's very commonly thought in Silicon Valley. If you look at it as a collaboration of people, you might have a different idea. And you might say, oh, well, people should have a new economy where they're incentivized or motivated to create new kinds of data. Yeah. Maybe there could be an infinite range of creativity we don't even imagine if we open ourselves to the possibility of it, not from machines, but people doing new things. People can change too, not just machines.
People focusing more on what... Sometimes we say, will technology make us more human? Can we focus more on our human strengths if technology takes over some of the tasks that maybe don't require human work as well?
Possibly. I mean, It's all a matter of how you think. So I wouldn't say it the way you just said it, because you're treating technology as a thing, and I don't think technology is a thing. I think technology is a human action. I don't think there's any agent present except for the humans. The technology is something people do. There's nothing else other than people. Now, once again, I can't prove that.
Yeah.
That's only one interpretation, but that is the interpretation that is the healthiest. It allows us for the most, it makes it easier to think about better futures if you use that interpretation.
Mm. If I go back to your comment about AI as being ultimately a combination of, efforts of different people, humans, how could we address that in a better way? And you came up with this concept of data dignity.
Right. So data dignity is a philosophy in which, instead of treating data, the bits in a computer, as just something that's there, we remember that every single bit that's in a computer is only there because somebody did something in the past. If you trace back the timeline, at some point, everything comes from a person, even if it's synthetic data, even if it's automatically gathered data from sensors. In every case, ultimately, it goes back to human action. It's kind of like saying, no matter how high-tech our machines are, if we have spaceships or whatever, there's ultimately a chain of machines going back to somebody holding a rock. It all comes from the human hand ultimately. And in the same way, every bit comes from human decisions and human actions if we go back. So if we can keep track of the origins in specific real humans, then we have this potential for a future economy where people could be paid for their contributions instead of all power going to the central node. So right now, all power in culture, just activity in culture, just makes companies like Google and Meta richer and richer, or now TikTok, and more powerful and more influential. So in a way, everything in culture backfires. But the same kind of thing will happen with AI, where expertise will backfire because it'll keep on being redefined as a value of whoever owns the top node instead of as coming from the people. So data dignity is technically tracing those origins in order to create a new incentive and credit structure. It's a complicated idea. Reconciling it with our ideas of privacy and dignity is a whole thing. So I don't quite know how to do it. It's a technical quest of my life. I believe we can figure something out, but I also have to remain realistic that it's quite challenging. But we do know a few things. We do know we can attribute which data was the most influential for what an AI program does minute to minute. I should mention that this is important for a second reason. So one of the big problems with AI now is that there are persistent ways in which it's unreliable. And one of them is called hallucinations, and another is called sometimes jailbreaking or prompt injection. And so these are ways that AI fails because we use the AI model to try to police itself, but then sometimes it just gets ridiculous because it's not grounded in reality, really. And also, a bad actor can get around the guardrails if and so you can get an AI program to give you information on making a bomb or something like that, despite attempts to prevent it, or to create damaging deepfakes or whatever it might be. If you can trace back which data was the most influential as the AI is operating, you have a different window. So, for instance, right now, if you just try to search for the word bomb, people can get around that in various tricky ways. But if you look at which human sources were essential for the output you're seeing, you should see something about bombs in that. And so it cuts through all of the decontextualization and brings back the context to deal with safety and hallucination issues. So completely aside from all the issues about human dignity and the future and creativity and all those things, just as a matter of function, remembering the people makes computers better, in my opinion. My opinion is not the mainstream opinion. But anyway, it is the thing I am pursuing.
And do you have? We're a media company. Let's since I have interest in that, and I'm obviously thinking about the role of media companies in the era of AI. And my hypothesis is that media companies could be more important than ever because there's one term that AI is killing the internet because it's producing a lot of fake content. If you go to social media, you will see a lot of AI generated content. Will that strengthen the role of media, human-made media, in the future? And is AI really killing the internet?
Yeah. Well, of course, we don't know the answer yet because it's unfolding. We will know the answer as events unfold. I deeply hope that AI doesn't kill the internet, and I deeply hope that media companies will find a new life in contrast to AI.
Exactly.
So that's a possibility. However, this will demand some creativity from you that we don't yet know about. Like what will have to happen is media companies have to invent new formats, new styles, new language, new ways of engaging with audiences, new ways of fitting into the world. Media companies will have to transform themselves in some way, and the goal of being differentiated from AI seems to me to be a good one. And so it is possible that in a way, this AI stuff will actually ultimately be a benefit by just demanding a sort of a focus and a contrast. I hope it works out that way, and it seems to me that it could, but it hasn't yet, so it's not automatic. It'll be work. It'll be work for you guys. And remember, if you start to succeed, there's somebody sitting in an office somewhere on the west coast of the U.S. who's saying, how do we get this thing? How do we get it?
But I mean,
so you're going to have to be careful.
I think it applies also to authors, to writers. If everybody can just use AI to be a media company and an author, how do you differentiate? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I just don't see it. How can that work in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky thing. Once again, it requires acts of creativity that haven't occurred yet. I would caution against being overly cynical or pessimistic or making assumptions that nothing is possible. Because I think in the past, surprises have come up and people have come up with things that we didn't anticipate. It's possible. I mean, Sarah, I'm just trying to think, okay, what specifically would I advise at this point? Because, see, for a while, there was this idea, well, people are kind of narcissistic, and instead of just looking at you, the media, you have to engage with them, so they're in it, and that's social media. But then the problem with that is AI then takes you away again, because now the AI can be the one, an AI can be trained for somebody's narcissism to lock them into something that you can't possibly be as good at, because the AI can train on that person's specific things and just lock them into a behavior modification loop like a trained animal, and you don't have enough data to do that. You can't possibly do it. It's whoever has the most central and biggest computer can do it, bringing us back to network effect. So the question is, how do you do something that cuts through that? Now, I think we see evidence of people longing for something real, something real in music, something real in food, something
writing.
In writing. I think it's there. So I think over the next few years there'll be almost like a war for reality, and your job will be how to use reality against illusion when illusion has such extraordinary powers. This is not something new in history or new in the world, of course, but the form of it will be different, and so this will be your battle.
I would like to maybe close with asking you a question on the future, since I've experienced you as somebody who, years ago was one of the early warners of social media and the effect it had, and particularly on the effects it had that were not obvious at the time. I remember when I came to Silicon Valley about 10 years ago, there was still this element of euphoria, of an interconnected world, and of this engagement with each other was kind of seen as a largely positive thing. And you were already warning about the kind of effects that are now generally seen, I think, and the ideas have about social media and technology in general, I would say, have changed markedly. And so I would like to know maybe if there are things that we are not seeing right now, maybe about AI or maybe about other technologies, maybe about virtual reality, or the person credited generally with coining that term, that we don't see quite now, maybe in as a in a positive way and also or in a negative way. I don't want to predetermine that, but that will become evident maybe in 5 to 10 years.
I mean, there's so much. It's very hard to know where to even begin. There's a sort of a contest between civilizational collapse and civilizational growth taking place in the coming years. In the AI community, there's a belief that what it's really about is the rise of AI, and that for many of my colleagues, AI is more important than people. Like, a thing you hear a lot is it's unethical to have human babies because it takes energy away from bringing about AI, and AI will be the better species that should inherit the planet. And who cares about humans? Who cares whether humans live or die? This other thing will be better. And since that's pretty widely believed in the community, there's almost a loss of what I used to think of as genuine entrepreneurship or innovation. It's almost like that's all for show, because we're really trying to turn the page entirely. Money won't be important. We don't care about money. Humans aren't important, all that. So not everybody thinks that, but many do. So I don't interpret that as a real possibility for all the reasons I've said. So what does it look like if, instead of things falling apart, things come together? If things fall apart, then they fall apart. And that's a real possibility in our time. Because we're, instead of addressing the climate, we're just pushing more and more in the name of AI. And in my community, there's this belief it doesn't matter what the carbon footprint of AI is, because AI will be so smart, it'll solve energy. It'll solve all our problems. Every problem we have, every medical problem, every energy problem, every ecological problem, every other problem will just be solved by super intelligent AI, so it doesn't matter. We don't care. It's silly to care. They believe that. I do not. I do not, because I think I understand how the stuff actually works, and I don't see it. I just don't see it. I see it very useful and part of a solution potentially, but it's not that much. And so let's look at a scenario in which people do pull it together. Then what are things that happens? I think it's pretty likely that if we have an energy system at all, and if everything's still functional. So right now in Silicon Valley, the general idea is in 2027 is sort of when humanity ends and the new species starts. I don't think that's going to happen. That's like the people who think the Christian rapture is coming. There was just another one of these dates a few months ago. No, that's not happening.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, okay. But let's say we make it through and we still have an energy system that's working and we still have crops and a food system that's working, say, in 10 years. The biggest change in daily life is probably robotics, actually, because the thing is that it's pretty likely that we can make robots better and cheaper, and that's a pretty big deal. And I can imagine that having a profound impact on agriculture and energy and climate and on many, many things. And the thing is, at the end of the day, any physical system that does anything needs energy and creates waste heat. I mean, there's no way around that. Like, we're not going to revoke physics, or that would be a very surprising outcome. And so any of these scenarios do have to deal with the foundational issues. But having said that, it seems pretty obvious that one next big thing is robotics. And the problem with that from an entrepreneurial point of view is that right now, there's not all that much in terms of options for entrepreneurs to contribute because it's all waiting on other feeder technologies. So, for instance, will somebody come up with a better battery? That's huge. And there's some material science things, and there's some actuator and sensor things. And so if all the feeder technologies come together, then the question is, at that moment when there's some critical mass of those, people will jump in. And is there going to be room for startups to really do something, or will it just be grabbed by the same big companies? Interesting question. We don't know yet. So that's a big one. That's huge. If it's really true that we're going to proceed as we are and put everybody out of work, which is a possibility, if there's no factory jobs and there are no jobs for drivers and so on, and if all of these things just kind of go away, what happens with all those people? And then in that case, there's a certain attitude about that in Silicon Valley where even the most enlightened people who think about it and care about it tend to come up with kind of patronizing solutions. Like, well, we'll stick them all in virtual reality, according to Mark Zuckerberg, or something. Or there's some way that something will happen with them, but it's just kind of like whatever. We'll try to manage it and not have them all killed, but who cares? That kind of thing. And remember, if you only hear praise from people who want something for you for year after year, for decade after decade, you start to go crazy. So these hyper-rich people do tend to go kind of crazy about that particular question and start to not really worry that much about the others. And then, what are some other really big things coming up? Another area I've worked on quite a lot is direct interface to the human nervous system, and there's a lot of interest in that. Exactly what that will be is not yet known. All the experiments are still super early, but I'm not afraid of things like that. Like, I like technology that's hyper ambitious and really dramatic. I'm into it. It's just that I don't want it to be accompanied by an autistic philosophy that makes it all pointless.
I mean, the one thing that I really thank you for taking time for talking with us. But one thing that really, the only thing that concerns me in this talk is that I gained the impression from what you're saying that people working on AI don't seem to like humans, actually.
Well, I don't want to... They're all individuals, and there's a wide variation of people. There's a certain preponderance of quite young men who are too young to have had children and are typically on the spectrum, are a little autistic to some degree and have trouble relating to people. That's very, very common. I would say it's the majority of the inner circle that I described.
That works on AI.
Yeah, I would say not everybody.
A few hundred below the top 5.
Yeah, and the top 5 are like that for sure.
Okay.
Not all. They're all individuals, and the story is a little different with each of them. But that sort of autistic style and sensibility is the norm and the center of the whole thing.
With no empathy?
Well, this gets tricky because it's hard to define. And so most of the people say, no, we're the most empathic people ever because we're actually doing something and everybody else is just talking or something like you'll find that when somebody has a very different philosophy, you can think you're communicating and using a word that you both know, but it's actually very different. And it's like that often. But the thing is, people change, and this is something that's extremely important. We tend to talk about all this as if computers are the thing that's changing and people are always the same, but that's not true at all. People change, and so all of these young men will grow up. Eventually I sometimes joke about this, but I think part of what's going on is that they're just at the age where they're trying to have girlfriends who are saying, do you want to have kids? And they're trying to come up with some excuse to not take the responsibility of becoming a father, which most young men go through at some point. And then, oh, no, but AI is more important. It would be unethical to have a human baby. And I think part of it is just that very ancient, the guy trying to get out of the responsibility.
So they should get better every year.
Let us just have sex without having children. And the lady's like, well, maybe we'll have kids. And they're like, no, but that would be unethical. We need AIs, not babies.
Well, that's a real discussion.
Oh, yeah. I hear it all the time.
It's a scary
It's funny,
world.
isn't it? It's funny. No, but I try to have a sense of humor about it because I do think, but the thing is, I think they'll grow up. I think they'll start, not that long ago, God, I think there was nobody with a baby at OpenAI at first. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's right. And now you're starting to run into people who actually have kids, and it's really important. I just think it's essential, And I remember, Silicon Valley's always been that way. It's always been very young people, mostly men, and it's a certain kind of feeling. But people do grow and they do change. That's one of the reasons why I'm more hopeful.
But on the practical side, Elon Musk, as far as I understand, warns the humanity from population collapse. He says that there will be too little people on the planet. So somehow this is contradictory then.
Yeah, the thing is that when you're dealing with accelerating change, you can have spirals up or spirals down.
Okay.
So that's not necessarily an inconsistent statement. You can be logically consistent and say, for instance, in a hyper-connected market without any kind of breaks that are triggered by events. Like right now on Wall Street, there are all these algorithms that trade all the time, the high frequency trading algorithms, and they trip breakers that shut them down very frequently because otherwise they would cause either spirals up or spirals down, which would be instant hyperinflation or instant hyperdeflation. Both are possible in low friction situations. So it's not logically inconsistent to say, we might have a population collapse or a population explosion. When you remove friction, and this is something we're going to see right now. Everybody wants to do this so-called agentic. Oh God, my community is so crazy. There was this idea that the way to be ethical is to think about the long-term future, and in the long-term future, you have to think about AI because AI will start to take over. So we have to do things now that are good for the AI. And one of the steps towards that was this idea of an agentic future. Now that's like the official marketing thing in all these companies. It's like so insane. But anyway, the idea of the agentic thing is that there's this whole ecosystem of these AI agents that are interacting with each other. Very soon, we're going to have this problem where their interaction will be very low friction. So it'll be very easy for them to spiral up or spiral down or just go into chaos. The fourth option is the hardest to get, which is creative constructive. So it's very easy to organize an economy for hyperinflation or hyperdeflation or total meaningless chaos for nothing. But to have a productive economy is very interesting. One of the greatest challenges of it is that sanity is boring. Right. And so if you have a functional economy, it is much less theatrical, and therefore everybody's unhappy because we've defined technology theatrically. So that's the fundamental contradiction we have.
Thank you, Jaron.
I know.
Providing us
I have another 10 questions that are triggered. I know you have to go.
But I really do think that you provided us, on the one hand, a glimpse into the world, into your community. which is in some ways also a glimpse into the future, how it might evolve. You've also provided us with hope of how it might not revolve. I think our biggest hope is that the future is boring. I heard that as well. And I have an idea that if the world indeed collapses in 2027, I think you're going to be with us here in Vienna as we'll be kind of the last ones to collapse.
Yeah,
right?
Because then the actual collapse will only happen 20 years later here, according to the
Just
joke.
a final question.
Okay.
You don't believe in the collapse also from your technological knowledge. Did I get that right?
If there's a collapse, it will not be due to technology, but due to human action. I don't believe technology should be thought of. I mean, it can be, but I think it's better not to think of technology as an actor in itself or as a beneficiary of itself or anything. It's a form of action that people undertake. And so can people be stupid enough to cause a civilizational collapse soon? Yes, we can. Sometimes in Silicon Valley, there's a whole world of terms that we debate that shut down all other debates. So everything is interpreted in terms of a narrow set of opposing ideas. And so one of these ideas is called superintelligence, that the superintelligent AI is coming, and everything you say is interpreted in those terms. But since I think the whole proposition is ridiculous, basically it means that people can't hear what I'm saying. But anyway, so one of the lines I use sometimes when I'm debating it is that all evidence indicates that there's a ceiling to intelligence. However, there is no floor to stupidity. If there's an asymmetry.
But I keep my faith in the good. You know, there are other dangerous things on this planet, such as in fields of weapons, and we also hope that no stupidity occurs there. And I hope if we can use this technology to benefit the humanity, we can prosper.
And there's so many things we could have talked about. We didn't get into automated weapon systems, which are... Oh, wait, there's so many things. And also, I thought you were going to ask me, what can Europeans do? What should Europe do? And maybe for another conversation.
For another conversation.
I have some thoughts about that, but you will not hear them today.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. And I hope that I can announce you as a speaker that will come over and over again to our studio and discuss the topics with us together with Martin, hopefully.
I am now a citizen, so...
We'll be super happy and honored to have you here.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us.
Okay,
I hope
cool.
you could really take a lot of input with you. I did, definitely. I learned a lot in this talk, and I hope we're going to continue learning with debating with
fantastic.
you. Thank you, and goodbye.